Kalispera, and very warm welcome to this session, which will look at the Advanced Taxation Cyprus exam, and specifically will focus on giving you hints to help improve your exam technique with the aim of gaining as many marks as possible and passing your exam in December 22. My name is Jelena Green. I am Education Relationships Lead for Europe and Americas at ACCA. And we are very, very fortunate today to be joined by Polina Jacovidou Michael.
Thank you, Jelena. Thank you very much. A very welcome to this webinar, which is dedicated to advanced taxation variant paper. It is a great honor that the ACCA asked me to deliver this webinar for you today, and I hope you find this webinar useful and help you to pass this demanding exam module. So today's agenda, we're going to start with the general approach to advanced taxation Cyprus exam. We're going to continue and see how you can earn marks in advanced taxation exam. We're going to see some frequent questions that students are usually asked. Also, we're going to give you some tips on how to present your answer based on the computer-based software. We're going to see the review of the June 22 exam and in relation to the examiner's report. Then we're going to focus on the question 4 of June 2021 based on the examiner article, Read the Mind of the Marker. I'm going to see the important parts that the examiner give us. There is a lot of enlightening information inside this article. And then we're going to have some time for your questions. We'll try to answer all your questions. So I'm sure you know that the advanced taxation exam it's a 3 hour and 15 minutes exam, and the pass mark is 50%. And of course, the questions are all compulsory, like any other exam module, ACCA exam module. So we have section A and section B. In section A, you're going to have a question for 35 marks. This is usually a computational question, and the examiner advises you to spend some time on computations because this is the most important part of the question. And this question also includes 4 professional marks. So in order to gain these professional marks, you need to prepare a formal report as per the requirements of the question. In question 2, you're going to find a question for 25 marks. And it's going to be an interrelated question with different taxes, same as question 1. Then in question 3 and question 4 in section B, usually you get a VAT question. And it could be something like the 75% of the question could relate to VAT, and there might be some 4 or 5 marks, which is relevant to some other parts of the syllabus. In question 4, if you have the VAT in question 3, question 4, you get something else. And usually the majority of the marks is going to be related in one subject, but not necessarily. So you need to be aware that all questions are scenario-based. All questions will contain a mixture of computational and theoretical parts. And so you need to calculate and you need to write. There are more computational things to do in question 1 rather than in question 2, 3, and 4. And there is always more than one topic area of the syllabus that may be examined in each question. So question 1 may have income tax, corporation tax, special defense contribution, VAT, nearly everything. In question 2 might be the same, could be, for example, corporation tax with some aspects of VAT, etc., etc. So in question 3 and 4, could be the majority of the marks could be relevant to one area of the syllabus only, but there is going to be few marks, 5, 6, 7 marks, that they will relate to another topic area. Now, how to earn marks in the advanced taxation exam. So, I'm going to give you some tips. The first tip, and probably this is one of the most important tips, is to practice as much as you can on the ACCA exam platform. There are a number of past exam questions that you can do in the ACCA website, and you can practice, and I advise you to do so. Yelena now will give you some more expert information for the practice platform. Yelena, over to you.
Thank you so much, Polina. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to, as Polina said, this is extremely useful resource. Our CB practice platform allows you to access the past exam questions in the platform and practice using this software that replicates the one used for the real exam. So not only you're practicing your questions, but you're also developing your tools and training both for using the platform tools and features to your advantage in the exam. So just to give you a quick example, I'm just going to show you. So here I have a few screenshots of what the platform looks like. As I mentioned before, you have a link to access the platform even from the webinar resources. You can access it through my ACCA or from study support section of the website. So here you have example of some of the features that are found in the exam. And to give you this example, for instance, I was talking to some colleagues who have been testing their performance, using some of the features of the exams. And my colleagues was saying that, for instance, using the spreadsheet feature in the exam, using formulas in the spreadsheet compared to using the calculator and then transferring calculations, actually saved about 7 minutes in the exam. So this is anecdotal and somebody's personal experience, but you will only know what works for you if you make time to practice. So in this practice platform, you can access the catalog, so you can find the Advanced Taxation Cyprus exams. You will see the last 3 exams, and you can use this to practice as a mock. There is also a blank workspace, which means that even if you're practicing on questions that are not on the platform, you can still write your answers in this format, just fine-tuning these skills to make you successful and to make you just, fly through this with ease when you're doing your actual exam. In order to further encourage you to use this feature, we are also doing a special support this session, whereas we will at the end of October, when the standard exam entries close, we're going to assign one 20-mark question to all students who have entered Advanced Taxation Cyprus, and then once you receive this question, we will send instructions by the email to explain how everything works. You will have a chance to submit this question to us for marking, so this will be additional question practice. So I will remind you about this at the end of the session as well, but just to mention it, to bring it in context. Also, here you can see again example of some of the features that are available in the session. So the exhibits with your details of your questions. So it's extremely important that you are used to this. In addition to just doing the practice, it's very, very important to try and also self-mark your examples, and you also have marking guides within this feature. So this is really important. I can't emphasize it enough, and to really give you as good insight into this and to try and convince you, I am actually going to use insights from one of our expert tutors, Ben Wilson, and we're now just going to spend 5 minutes hearing about the benefits of self-marking and looking through some examples of these features in the practice platform.
Practicing past exam questions can really boost your chances of passing the ACCA exams. This recording is going to give you some tips on how to maximize the value you get out of question practice by effectively debriefing your answers. We're going to start with the benefits of self-marking before looking at calculation and written questions using the practice platform software. Benefits of self-marking, first of all, helps you to humanize the marker, make them real, make them a person. They're not a machine, and we're trying to think about their needs, trying to make their life easy, because if you make it easy for them to mark your script, they'll give you more marks. Understanding the examiner, seeing their model answers and looking at the way they design exam questions can help us to design our answers to score marks. And hopefully, through doing self-marking, you'll start to change the way you present your answers to make them more user-friendly, easier to review and easier to mark. Calculation questions, first of all. 2 things I'm doing when I'm looking at my answer. I'm firstly auditing it in detail and looking for where I've made mistakes. Are there any technical areas that I need to address? Or have I made a silly mistake somewhere? And can I apply the own figure rule easily? That means if I make a mistake somewhere early in the calculation, can the marker follow what I've done so that I can be awarded follow-through marks? Here's a PM past exam question. If I want to save the suggested solution, I can click in here, press Control P and print it as a PDF. So I've got a copy for my own records. Auditing my answer, I can see that my shortfall does not match the shortfall in the answer. So something's gone wrong. I can see that these numbers are correct. And it's here, within demand, that 8,900, I've made a transposition error. And it's a silly mistake. Have I made my numbers easy to follow from there? Well, these are pretty simple and easy to follow, timesing one number by another. But when I get down here, I've done a sum of these numbers and added another number in, this 5,000. Now that's a correct thing to have done. That's the right thing to have done. But by adding multiple things within the same cell, it makes it difficult for the marker to follow what I've done if I've made a mistake somewhere. So it would have been better to present that 5,000 separately so that the marker could see it individually and not have to click into my cell to see the answer. I can also see that I've answered the shortage of Bella part of the question, but there are 2 further bits here, step 2 and step 3, that I haven't done. And if I look at the question stem, I can see that these were clear. I did that bit calculating the shortage, but I didn't do steps 2 and 3. So note to self, make your calculations easier to follow by separating out the steps, and make sure you answer all parts of the requirement. Let's now focus on written requirements. I'm looking for, have I answered all parts of the question? We saw there in that calculation question that there were several parts, making sure that I've answered every single bit of the question. Have I written enough given the verb in the requirement? If it's a verb like list or state, I only need a couple of words per sentence to make the point. But if it's explain, clarify, discuss, then I'm going to need a couple of full sentences to really do it justice. Is my answer clear and easy to review? Really good test for this is to leave a gap after having answered the question before you review your written answer. Can you understand what it is that you wrote? If you can't understand it, what chance does a marker have? Here's a question from the PM exam that I've already written an answer for. The question is to discuss whether this company should breach an agreement with an organisation called Encompass Health. And the suggested solution is showing here. And the marking scheme is telling me that it's there's 4 marks available, 1 for each valid point. I can already see in my answer that I've only written 3 points, so I've probably not got enough here. Pause the recording if you want to have a detailed read of my answer, but I've tried to show some good and bad practice. That first point there is really easy to read and review. The things that make it easy to read and review are the sentences are short, and it starts with something that tells you what the point is about. This one's about exit costs. Compare that to this point here, which is long and waffly. I read through it and I'm not sure if I can really understand what it's talking about. I'm much more going for the style of the first point or the third point, short and sharp. Thanks for watching this recording. I hope you found it useful and you'll be doing more thorough debriefs of your own answers in future.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can find it and other similar resources also on this YouTube channel that I signposted in the study support resources section. On this slide, just finally, again, reminder of some of the resources and tools that can help you further navigate through the practice platform. There is a page on our website with short videos guiding you through different stages of, before the exam, first part of the exam, and so on. So you can really, watch these short videos just to get yourself ready and to make sure that, this tool really works to your advantage on the exam day. So once again, I'm going to hand you back over to Polina, who will then share her other tips for your exam success. Thank you, Polina.
Thank you, Helena. So, tip number 2, study the assumed knowledge required. So, before joining the Advanced Taxation course, you must ensure that you have studied the assumed knowledge by heart. The basic taxation knowledge is a must in order to be able to join and pass the Advanced Taxation exam paper. So, in order to pass the Advanced Taxation, you must have the detailed knowledge of the Advanced Taxation syllabus. That includes assumed knowledge of the technical areas brought forward from the taxation module, which must be refreshed and updated. So probably you have done this paper 2 years ago, and you have been tested on a different tax year. So now you need to refresh the syllabus and keep yourself updated. So all taxation chapters, except capital statements, are very, very basic, and they are required for the Advanced Taxation. You need to revise and practice taxation questions before joining the Advanced Taxation. This is my advice. And remember that never is too late. So even if you have not done this before you join, there is still time. I must tell you that the main reason for failing the Advanced Taxation exam is the lack of the basic knowledge of the taxation syllabus. I have tested this thing in the last few sittings, where I had 2 students who failed Advanced Taxation many times, and they came to me for advice. So what I have advised them is to use the taxation question bank or the assumed knowledge workbook and do as many questions as they could. in order to make sure that they know the taxation syllabus very well. They did so, and they both passed after I don't know how many attempts. So make sure you do the same. Tip 3, use a step-by-step approach. So when you're answering an advanced taxation question, you need to think about the following steps. So when you have them in mind and you follow the step-by-step approach, you're going to write everything which is required for the specific question and what the examiner wants to see in the question. Step 1 is that you need to write the relevant legislation and explain the relevant provisions in detail. So write the legislation. Step 2, apply the relevant legislation to the exam question. So you need to apply the legislation and use the facts of the exam question. Step 3, show calculations if required. So if there is a requirement to calculate, then show your calculations. Step 4, explain the tax implications. What are the tax implications? Involving all related taxes. It might relate to corporation tax, special defense contribution, explain the deemed dividend distribution and the effect on SDC and GHS. Step 5, consider any other relevant taxes or issues, such as social insurance contribution, such as GHS. Step 6, explain the statutory requirements that the taxpayer has, for example, the deadline to submit the tax return and the deadline to pay the related tax pay. Step 7, you need to compare the options if there are options, and you need to be able to give advice if required. So this approach to a question is more relevant to question 2, 3, and 4. In question 1, there is more calculations involved in a question. Let's go to tip 4. You need to be able to understand the requirements of the question. Sometimes it's very common to feel that you wrote a great answer and then you have a fail and you're wondering why you failed. In the exams, you need to answer the requirements. You probably wrote a great answer, but does not answer the requirements of the question. So you must concentrate on what the requirements of the questions are. What do they specifically require? What they want? So you must plan your answer to answer the requirements of the question. Answer the question. You need to keep looking back at the requirements at all times, so make sure you answer all parts of the requirements. And you need to consider whether you have identified the relevant issues. You have to thought about the point you want to make before start writing, so think about it for a minute and then start writing. It is wise to think and understand when a particular calculation is needed before you prepare it. Otherwise, you may lose very valuable time and calculate rubbish. So, will this calculation help you answer the requirements of the question? If yes, do it. If not, go to the next one. Another consideration is whether the question is asking to prepare a report. So if the question is asking to write a report, like question 1, you need to be able to prepare a formal report. From the subject, the date. You need to consider where you are addressing the report. And then you need to consider what are the relevant taxes that I need to calculate. What are the relevant taxes that I need to explain? Do I have to explain a legislation provision? Then, if you have to prepare a report, prepare a formal report. So make sure you're going to get the presentation marks. There are 4 presentation marks that it's so easy to get them. So by just drafting a formal report, addressing to the requirements of the question, giving a kind of conclusion in the end. Prepare notes and calculations. So sometimes you have to do notes and you have to do calculations as well. So if the question requires prepare notes and calculations, then this could be an informal report to, for example, your manager, including notes and calculations. So if you have this requirement, you can write in note form, you can do draft calculations, and you can refer to the calculations and explain what your considerations have been. Then you calculate. So when the question asks you to calculate, that means it gives more value to calculations, and therefore there are more marks which are related to calculations. So usually we have this requirement in question 1. So there is a requirement for report, but it is specifically required to do a number of taxes like corporation tax, capital gains, special defense contribution, income tax, for example. So the question specifically says there are 5 marks for corporation tax, 3 marks for SDC, 2 marks for VAT. So you know that you have to calculate the specific taxes. When the question says explain, you need to explain. You need to provide explanations. The value goes to explanations rather than to calculations. So you need to concentrate on explaining things rather than calculate things. So if you do calculations only, you're not going to get any marks. Or you maybe get some marks, but not enough to pass. So you need to understand what is required. Prepare the following notes and calculations, calculate the supporting explanations, explain the supporting calculations with supporting calculations. So have this in mind and work accordingly. Right. Let's go to frequently asked questions by the students. So I have gathered here a number of frequently asked questions that I usually get, like, what is the most important topic in advanced taxation? A number of topics are important. All questions will require the mixture of taxes and interaction of taxes. However, if I need to list few important chapters, I would say corporation tax is important. Even the basic calculation tax, the basic calculation of corporation tax. SDC, special defense contribution, is important, together with deemed dividend distribution, income tax, a simple calculation of income tax, as well as VAT. Next question. Question 2. Are there any specific topics that will be tested in specific sections? Yes, actually. So this examiner usually tests VAT in the section 2, and it's going to be a full question on VAT. This is how usually is, but not necessarily. So usually VAT is tested in the second part of the exam paper, even though sometimes there are requirements to write the VAT implications in question 1 and question 2. But I cannot say that there are any other chapter that may be tested in question 1 or question 2. So in question 1, for example, you're going to see an interaction of taxes for sure, and there will be a requirement for many taxes involved, and there will be a specific requirement to calculate corporation tax, income tax, VAT, for example, GHS, or special defense contribution, or any other taxes. So there is going to be given marks for the specific tax that you need to calculate. So you're going to understand that you need to calculate the specific taxes. Question 2. How much of the TX syllabus will feature in advanced taxation exam? I could say 60 to 65%. So 60 of 65% of the advanced taxation syllabus consists of the taxation syllabus. So you can understand how important is taxation syllabus is. Right. Question number 4. I have studied the 2021 material. What are the changes in 2022? Now, there are not many changes in 2022. So in the syllabus includes all new provisions released from 1st October 2020 to 30th of September 2021. This is the syllabus which is included in the 2021 exams. So a summary of the changes will be the following. The flat rate of GHS of 2.65 applying throughout the year. The social insurance cap has increased to 57,408. There is an EU VAT changes as of 1st July 2021. And more specifically, we have the application of one-stop shop for VAT registration within EU. We have the extension of the income tax exemption of 20% until 2025. And then, not very important, we have an introduction of 2 new tax department forms for special defense contribution, the Team D602 and Team D603. So these are the changes during 2022. Right, question 5, should I attend section 1 or section 2 first? So there is no clear answer here and no correct answer actually. The correct answer should be that you should start from the question you feel more comfortable with. So if you feel comfortable with VAT, start with VAT. If you feel more comfortable with question 1, doing all these calculations and writing the report, start with question 1. It is very important to feel comfortable with question. That will increase your confidence, and that will increase your chances of passing. Question 6. Will I lose marks for typos and poor grammar? No marks will be lost for typo and poor grammar as long as the examiner understands what you want to write, what you want to say, what you want to explain. So if it's clear, even if there are typos or there is bad dictation or a poor grammar, there is no problem at all. The examiner and the markers will be fair with you. Can I use abbreviations in the exams? Of course you can. You can use abbreviations, but this is the same for all papers actually, but more applicable for taxation probably. It's better to use full words the first time you refer to the specific term. So when you refer to a specific term, write it in full words. In parentheses, write your abbreviation and then use abbreviation. So question number 8, can I use bullet points in my answers? The answer is yes, you can. You can use bullet points. Not in the report though. So if the requirement is to write a report, you need to write a report. You cannot use bullet points. But if the requirement is to explain, or if the requirement is to write notes, of course you can use bullet points. And that will be quicker, and that will save you time, and that will be clearer to the marker as well. Question 9. What is the most common reason why students fail advanced taxation? I think I have answered this question already, the lack of the assumed knowledge. If you don't know the assumed knowledge very well, you may fail. So the common reason why students fail the exam is the lack of the assumed knowledge. If the student did not learn the assumed knowledge very well, probably because the student had been exempted from the taxation module, then it is more likely to fail. So you must be alert that if you have an exemption from taxation, you need to make sure that you study the taxation syllabus very, very, very well. And lastly, question number 10, what strategy do I need to follow in order to pass the exam? So, first, you need to study the assumed knowledge very well. Point 1. Secondly, you need to study consistently. You have to do the test, you have to do the mocks. You have to practice as many past exam questions as you can, and you have to practice on the platform as well, on the exam platform. Make sure you follow the step-by-step approach so you have a guidance in your head that you have to write these, and these. And then make sure you provide all the explanations on everything you are writing or you are calculating. Now, let's go to computer-based exam tips. How to present your answer. Basically, you need to use the Word part for written part and spreadsheet for the computations. In practice, sometimes it's quite difficult to jump from one part to the other, from Word to spreadsheet and spreadsheet to Word. So for advanced taxation exam, this does not apply for all papers, of course. This advice, it's only for advanced taxation. So because advanced taxation is mainly explanations and very few computations are part of question 1, it might be wise to write everything on the word processor. Even if you will be saving some time when you do calculations on the spreadsheet, it will waste more time to jump from word to spreadsheet and cross-reference. So if the computations are very, very few, then might be wise to write everything on the word processor. Make sure you cross-reference when you go from Word to spreadsheet so you can help the marker to show him where your calculations and explanations are. Remember, you can copy and paste from question. So if you can see something that you can use Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. The examiner's guidance, though, coming from the examiner's report, is not to copy and paste from questions, unless this is something very limited. And also, you should not copy and paste in various parts of the paper. And another important thing when you're writing on the word processor is always to use headings and subheadings. For example, give from mother to son, let's say. Capital gains tax. Explain everything that is relevant to capital gains tax. Income tax. Explain everything that relates to income tax implications. Stamp duty. Transfer fees, if any. Okay. GHS. So write the top heading that I'm going to discuss this part of the question now. And then, as a subheading, use the different taxes that you will discuss. So you must always use workings. So if you don't do workings, you may miss a number of marks. You need to show them clearly, and you have to cross-reference the workings with the report or whatever you're writing in the Word part. You can even show them in the face of the computation. So sometimes when you are writing on spreadsheet, you can leave a column and say on top workings, and you can do all your workings there. So my advice is to avoid doing the workings in the cell, even this is acceptable for exam purposes. However, it is not easy for the marker to mark your question. So it's better not to do your workings in the cells, but it's to show them separately. Show them separately is a better exam technique. Now, let's go to the next section, which is the review of June 2022 paper and the examiner's report. So, in the last sitting, we had the question 1, which carried 35 marks as usually. And there was a typical scenario of a company disposing of immovable property. And the students were required to compare the taxes payable between the sale being taxed under capital gains tax and as being taxed as a trading profits. So actually the budgets of trades were required. The question required to calculate special defense contribution, deemed dividend distribution, and GHS calculations as well. So the examiner said that students were very well prepared for this exam. He was very, very happy with the performance on this exam. He said that the computations were clearly marked and many candidates prepared the expected table with all relevant tables and taxes. So if the question requires to prepare a table, the examiner is expecting to see some kind of a table in your answer. So he was happy with that. And he was also happy with the computer-based exam skills. And they were well demonstrated both in the presentation and formatting of the answers of the students. So these are good news, actually. And let's go to question 2. Question 2 carried 25 marks as usual. And part A tested the taxation of shipping profits, something which does not come up in the exam very often. I think last time this came up, it was in June 2016, if I remember well. So part B tested the tax liabilities in respect of the revaluation of an investment property. There was a requirement to advise and calculate the related tax on the gift of land by a company to a daughter of the shareholder. And lastly, you had to comment on the taxation of a gift of shares from a mother to a son. So for question 2, the examiner was not very happy. Actually, he was not happy at all. That was not a very well answered question. And what he said in his examiner report, he said that many candidates did not demonstrate adequate knowledge on the taxation of shipping profits. I guess this is the reason was that it has been so long ago that the taxation of shipping profits have been examined. There many students find difficult in identifying which taxes were relevant to this case. So for part B, I'm talking about. So they found it difficulty to understand which taxes were related to what. And in part C, most of the candidates were able to identify the tax implications on the gift of shares, and that was the most well answered part in the question. Question 3 was a question on VAT. Generally, there was a VAT question, and as well as a requirement on the applications for deductions of tax at source on the rental income payable. So actually, there was a VAT implications on rental income, and the examiner was not happy at all because the candidates seemed to find this question challenging, and more specifically, the challenging part was to explain the partial exemption and the VAT rules that they relate to partial exemption. So partial exemption is a part that always puzzles the students. And so please practice on these type of questions, because this is something that the examiner likes. And this is tested quite frequently. So question number 4, in this question, the candidates were required to comment on 2 theoretical magazine extracts, which had commented on Cyprus tax system in general. So the examiner found 2 magazine extracts and request the students to comment on these extracts. And the examiner appeared to be very happy with question 4, and they were very pleased to see that candidates generally answered both parts quite well. The overall comment of the examiner was that in an advanced taxation paper, a candidate is required to identify, to explain the principles used in the calculations, and to provide a well-argued answer. So the most important part is that a skillful application of tax principles learned is a key of doing well in this paper. So actually, this is the step-by-step approach if you think about it. So write the principles, apply the principles in the case scenario, advise. Do the calculations and advise. This is what the examiner wants, and this is what you need to write in your exams. So few comments derived from the December 2021 paper was that the students sometimes could not perform the simple computation, potentially demonstrate that there is a lack of practice, especially in the use of past exam questions. So the advice here of the examiner is to practice the past exam questions. So another issue that we had here is that the question was required to summarize the results into a table, and most of the candidates did not prepare table. So if the question requires to prepare the taxes and the summary of the taxes on a table, you have to do so. So number 3 was one of the main issues that the examiner commented, is that the headings to many of the computational schedules were not clear. So you must always use headings. You have to explain what you're doing. So it is advisable for candidates to clearly state the purpose of each computation by including a simple heading. So use headings, use subheadings. So in part D, there was a requirement on the calculation of benefits in kind, and the examiner said that the candidates did not appear to know how to calculate the benefits in kind. So it has been advised to practice on the calculation of benefits in kind. These appear to be relevant in this exam setting as well. So make sure you know how to calculate the benefits in kind. The successful journey to an ACCA exam requires question practice. The same applies for the advanced taxation exam. Practice is everything. Practice makes perfect. Of course, you cannot be perfect in an ACCA exam, but you can do very, very well. Do as many questions as you can, but more specifically, the questions which have been set by the current examiner, i.e. since June 2016. About a year ago, the examiner has written an article on which is required by the student to be awarded with the maximum marks in an advanced taxation question. The article is very enlightening and contains valuable information and explains in detail how the marks are awarded. I will be using this article for the purpose of this presentation. We are going to use the second question of the article, which is question 4 of June 2021. So for question 2, 3, and 4 of the exam paper, all is needed is a step-by-step approach, which has been already explained. Remember that you need to avoid copying the information given in the question in your answer or copying and paste the same answer in many parts of the question. This is something that the examiner does not like. So for questions 2, 3, and 4, we need to concentrate on one important point, and that is the step-by-step approach. In all examiners' report of the previous exam sitting, it is highlighted that all is needed to pass the exam is a skillful application of tax principles learned. This is what the step-by-step approach does. It applies the principles. So, in summary, what you have to do is the following. Step 1, write the relevant legislation and explain the related provisions in detail. Step 2, apply the relevant legislations in the exam question. Step 3, show calculations if required. Step 4, explain the tax implications involving or related taxes. Step 5, consider any other relevant taxes or issues. Step 6, explain the statutory requirements of the taxpayer, i.e. the deadline of the tax return submission and the deadline of the related tax payment. And lastly, step 4, you need to compare the options and give advice if this is required. Now, in terms of computation marks, computations are important in question 2 to 4 only when the requirement states calculate. So when the question states calculate means that you need to show calculations in detail. And on top of that, when the question says explain, you may need to calculate, but you must explain your calculations in full. I advise you, even when the requirement says calculate, explain what you're doing. Show the calculations in detail. So you help the examiner to give you the required marks. Now, when you're attempting a question, the first thing you do is to start reading the requirements. Why is that? Because you read the requirements, you concentrate on what the question requires, and then you go to the case scenario. You read the case scenario, but you have in your mind the requirements. So it's easier to spot the points that it will be given in the exam. So let's go to question 4, June 2021, and let's go to read the requirements of the question. Now, I have in front of me the article of the examiner. I will share my screen now. I have the article of the examiner, this is it. And on the other hand, I've got the question, which has been updated actually with the June 2022, with the 2022 exam legislation. So this is a 20-mark question, and candidates are given an email from the finance director of a foreign company, and the company in this question owns a warehouse in Cyprus that is not used. The warehouse was bought to lease it for a good return. However, this did not materialize. Mark is trying to understand the tax implication of a proposal they have given to exchange the warehouse for a house. So he's going to give the warehouse, he's going to take a house. The company, I mean. The company, XML Limited, is not a tax resident of Cyprus. But Mark is worried that it may become resident because it will start receiving rental income. Is this the case? We need to comment on that. And finally, there's some information given for the exchange of properties, and the candidates need to calculate the capital gains tax on that and explain the tax implications. So let's see the requirements. The first requirement is to explain how the definitions of management and control and permanent establishment would be applied to XML Limited and how this will impact on the taxation of the income of the company. So what is the important thing here? The important thing is the question requires to explain. You need to explain. And you need to explain the definitions of management and control, one. And secondly, the permanent establishment, two. And you need also to explain how this will impact the taxation of the income of the company. So we have 6 marks for that. So we need to write the definition of management control. What is management control? Remember the step-by-step approach. We need to write down what the legislation provides or how this is used in practice. And we need to apply this to the case scenario. So we're going to use the facts of the scenario, and we have to relate this with the explanations on the definition that we have provided. The same will happen with permanent establishment. Okay, and then we need to explain what is the impact on the taxation of the income of the company. Let's go to see what the first candidate answer, because here we have 2 answers of 2 different candidates. One passed the exam and the other one did not. Passed the question and the other one did not. So let's go to see first of all what is the observation of the specific requirement. So here the candidates need to apply their knowledge on the terms of management and control and the permanent establishment and advise the company accordingly. So it is important to be able to connect the definitions with the case scenario. So it is expected that these are linked to the facts which has been given in the email. So let's see the answer of the first candidate. So the first candidate says that management and control are used to determine the resident of a company. A company is said to be tax resident in Cyprus if management and control are exercised in Cyprus. Okay. If management and control is exercised in Cyprus. You're going to see that there is a mark for that. However, you need to explain that there is no provision in the legislation which explains what the management control is, and there is half mark for that. Remember that. So you need to write down the general how do we consider the management and control, because it's not defined in the legislation. And these are the three considerations that we need to take into account: the place of residency of the majority of the directors, the place where the board meetings are held, and the place where the general policies are formulated. So you can see that there are half mark for each one of them. And there is also half mark to say that the coexistence of the three material is essential. There is another half mark for that. So you need, though, to connect these with the facts given in the email in order to get full marks. So moving to the next requirement on the permanent establishment, you need to explain what a permanent establishment is, and you need to say that this is defined in the legislation. There is half mark to say that this is defined in the legislation. So a permanent establishment can be a factory, an office, a branch, a warehouse, a place where the extraction of natural resources. So you need to conclude that based on the facts given in the question, the company cannot be considered tax resident of Cyprus since the management control is not in Cyprus. So now you can see the connection of the facts of the question with the definition that we have already given. None of the directors is Cyprus tax resident, the board meetings are not held in Cyprus, and none of the decisions concerning the company are made in Cyprus or by Cyprus residents. Therefore, the company is not resident. So here you have a conclusion. The company is not resident and will only be taxed on the income derived from Cyprus. So this is important to mention that. And there is a requirement for that. The requirement says, what is the impact on the taxation of the income of the company? So this is what you're going to say, that the company will only have to pay tax on Cyprus income. On the other hand, when we want to make a conclusion or give explanations about the permanent establishment, we need to describe that the warehouse located in Cyprus could be considered a permanent establishment, and therefore it will be taxed under the Cyprus tax. So if this warehouse has any income derived from Cyprus, this will be subject to tax. However, you connect the question to the facts of the question that says the warehouse has been empty and unused, and since acquisition there are no activities. Therefore, there was no income. Therefore, the warehouse cannot be considered as a permanent establishment. So that was an excellent answer, actually, explaining the definitions, connect them with the facts of the question, and give your conclusion. This is what is required. Let's go to see what the second candidate has written on this question. So we have another candidate. Here it is. So the second candidate said that in order for a company to be considered as tax resident in Cyprus, the management control of the company should be exercised in the Republic. Okay, correct. There is no guidance in the legislation. There is no guidance in the legislation. So obviously here, this guy got another half mark, not only 1 mark, but he got half mark for stating that. And in relation with the management and control, however, the below should be taken into account: where the majority of the directors reside, where the directors and board meetings are held, where the general policy of the company is formulated, and the coexistence of the criteria is essential. And you can see that you get half mark for each one of them, and then half mark to say to state about the coexistence of the 3 criteria. So furthermore, this guy has to connect the question, the definition, with the facts of the question. Let's see what happened here. Besides the fact that the place where the board of directors are held is essential, it is a place where the real management and control that it is decisive. There are no clear cuts in the legislation about what management and control means. However, it is the place where the day-to-day operations decisions of the company that should be considered. Okay, so this is okay, but it doesn't connect the definition to the facts of the question. So some valuable marks are not given here. Let's go to permanent establishment. Permanent establishment, it is a place where the head office and the operations and decisions of the company take place. Is it? Is not a correct answer, this one. So it doesn't explain the definition very well. So the examiner gives only half mark, only partial marks on that. And it doesn't connect the definition with the question. So again, he missed valuable marks. So, however, there is a conclusion here that gives 1 mark to him. Taking into account the facts of the question, none of the above is applicable in the case of XML, since the company cannot consider to have a management control in Cyprus. Why? We have to explain that. There are no resident directors here. Neither the empty warehouse can be considered as a permanent establishment. Again, why? And what is the impact on the taxation? So since the management and control is not in Cyprus, the company will be taxed only on Cyprus income. So these are not explained in the question, and therefore this guy got something like 2, 3, 4, 4.5 question. That was okay. I will probably give less in this answer. So that was completely fine. So 4.5, and he didn't actually connect the question and the definitions with the facts of the question. So that was the part A. Let's go to part B. So in part B, the requirement is to compute. Be careful, the question here says compute. So you need to show calculations, and you need to show all the details required, not just numbers. You need to show the calculations that you have done. For example, how did you calculate the RP, the indexation allowance? An example. So you need to explain everything. And on taxes payable by the company in Cyprus in the exchange of property, if the exchange of property goes ahead. And here it says that assume the retail price index at the time of exchange will be 224. So obviously here we need to do a simple capital gains tax computation on exchange of properties. Let's see what the first candidate did. So here it just says it's just explaining that as shown in working one, we need to go and see the working one. There will be no capital gains tax payable. So it is stated here that there is a rollover relief. And there will be an effect if the house will be disposed at a later stage. So let's go to see the working one. So here is a working one. So it starts with market value, deducts the index cost, but the question here is, how did he calculate the index cost? Deducts the transfer fees, calculates the capital gains tax. How did he calculate the capital gains tax? Question mark. Question mark. And then it says that the rollover relief is 171684, restricted to 168084. So here it demonstrates that he knows how to calculate the rollover relief, but is not very clear. So in this question, there were 4 marks available, and he got 2.5. And the reason is because he did not explain all the calculations. So here we need to explain the calculation here in the index cost. We need to explain how we calculate the capital gains tax. We need to explain how we calculate the rollover relief. And I guess the base cost of the house has to be also calculated here. Let's see the candidate 2 in this part. So candidate 2, if you can see, starts with the warehouse selling price. And he actually shows here how the indexation allowance, the index cost, is calculated. So it says times the RPI on the date of sale over the RPI on the date of acquisition, and he gets the index cost. There is a deduction of transfer fees, and there is the gain on disposal, and says that the whole amount will be rollover. So in this question, he gets 2.5 again, but actually there was a miscalculation on rollover relief. So actually he missed this mark here, minus 1.5 mark, because he did not calculate the rollover relief correctly. However, the examiner was happy because he explained the calculation of the index cost there. So he was awarded with 1 mark instead of half mark. However, the calculation is incorrect because there was no capital gains tax. There should be a capital gains tax on the amount not reinvested. And also it doesn't show here how he calculated the rollover relief, which is not correct. Also, I was expected to see the base cost of the house. So I believe we need to state here the base cost of the house. Right. So that was part B. Let's go to see what part C requires now. So in part C, we need to explain the Cyprus tax implications for XML for receiving rental income from the house in Paphos, including your explanation how the income should be declared, which taxes are payable, which are not, and when the taxes are due. Look at this. We have 6 marks available. We have to explain the Cyprus tax implications for XML of receiving rental income. We need to provide explanations on everything because the question says explain. We need to explain how the income should be declared, another mark here, which taxes are payable, which are not for, and when the taxes are due. So obviously, each one of the requirements will be awarded with at least 1 mark, or more or less 1 mark, because there are 5 requirements and 6 marks available. And there is a note here stating that no calculation are required for this part. So if you make calculations, you will not get any marks at all. So let's see what candidate 1 has done. Here it is. So part C, the rental income will be taxed under corporation tax at 12.5%. Okay. All expenses related to the property are allowable for tax purposes. This is correct. The tax payment will be due on 31st July and 31st December of the year of assessment, and any remaining will be paid by 1st August. I expect to see that this is subject to self-assessment, and there should be provisional tax, which is paid 31st July and 31st December. So you need to provide some more explanations, some detailed explanations. And the remaining will be paid by 1st August of the following year by self-assessment. I think it has to be stated here. Wear and tear are liable for the remaining of the years. This is also correct. So let's see. He got 2.5. And he didn't actually explain the self-assessment very, very well, at least not in detail. But he got 2.5 marks. The rental income will be subject to SDC at 3% on the 75% of the gross income. Companies are not liable to GGs. Very good. So subject to SDC 3% on the 70%. So we deduct 25, and on the balance, we calculate SDC. Companies are not liable to HGC. It's good to mention this. So you are explaining here that you are aware that companies do not pay GGs, only the individual pay GGs. However, since XML is a not Cyprus company, the rental income will not be liable to SDC. So in my opinion, this here, it has to be explained that resident individuals or companies, okay, stay-on companies only, do not pay SDC. So this company is non-resident, therefore no SDC should be paid. Here the examiner has given 1 mark for this, and all the available marks have been given. So we need to provide the VAT tax treatment here, and actually that was only for half mark, but the VAT has to be stated here. The VAT implications, I mean, it needs to be stated here. It is relevant nowadays. So he got 3.5 out of 6. So what is missing? Let's see what is missing. So how the income should be declared? It should be declared through the provisional tax return for income tax purposes. Which taxes are payable? So it says only about income tax, corporation tax, I mean, and SDC, which the company is not liable to SDC. Which are not? This was clearly explained. He missed VAT and when the taxes are due. So we need to explain about the income tax and just this, because SDC is not applicable. So he made some marks there. Let's go to see what candidate 2 wrote. Let's go to candidate 2. here it says XML is not a tax resident company, since, as we have identified above, the management of the company is not exercised in Republic. In respect of the rental income, though, since the property is located, this income will be taxed in Cyprus. So this is correct, actually. As a result, XML will be liable to pay SDC. This is wrong. XML will not pay SDC. It will only pay corporation tax on that. SDC is due at the rate of 3% of the 75%. It is, but XML is not liable to SDC because it's a non-resident company. And here is explaining the dates that the SDC is payable, completely wrong. So this company missed first to state the provisional, the self-assessment return, the provisional tax return, the due rates of payment, that no SDC is payable, no GHS is payable, missed the VAT point, and all these things, they are not there. So he was not awarded any marks at all. So lastly, let's go to Part D. So in Part D, there was a simple, straightforward requirement to explain the tax resident rules and advise how Mr. Chai can achieve Cyprus tax resident status for 4 marks. Here, you can simply have to explain the 183 rule, the 60-day rule, and then you need to consider when Mr. Chai will achieve the Cyprus tax resident status. So I guess could be 1 or 1.5 mark on 183 rules, 1 or 1.5 mark on 60-day rule, and then to state when Mr. Chai can achieve the Cyprus tax resident status, at what stage. So let's see what candidate 1 wrote here. So let's see. So there are 4 marks available here, 4 marks available. The tax resident is an individual who stays in Cyprus for more than an aggregate number of 183 days in tax year. Alternatively, an individual is considered tax resident. So here, in my opinion, it needs some more explanations. 183 days in a calendar year or tax year, this is correct. And then you need to explain something. The day of arrival counts as a day outside Cyprus. The day of departure counts as a day in Cyprus. I think some more explanation. I would like to see some more explanation here. Or alternatively, an individual is considered as tax resident if, this is the 60-day rule, spend more than 60. This is not correct. It's 60 plus. So if he spends 60 days, it qualifies a condition. They're not residents in another country, and they do not spend more than 183 days in another country in a calendar year, all right? They're employed or hold an office in Cyprus, correct? They have a permanent residence in Cyprus, owned and rented. These are correct. So the 60-day rule was correct, a part of this point there. So I guess 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5. So the half point, he missed it out of the 183 rule, I believe. So some more explanation should be given there. Here, even though he said more than 60 days, the mark was awarded in full. And then Mr. Chai will be moving to Cyprus permanently. Now we need to relate the legislation with the scenario facts. So Mr. Chai will be moving to Cyprus permanently. Then the issue of the permanent resident is resolved. However, Mr. Chai most probably was a tax resident in another country before coming to Cyprus. Furthermore, he is retired, so he will not be employed by a Cyprus employer or hold an office in Cyprus. So the 60-day resident cannot be given to him since he does not meet the criteria. So this is a very good point here. So Mr. Chai is coming to Cyprus to retire. So there is no meaning to discuss the 60-day rule. We need to discuss the 183-day rule. And this is what is done here. And this is what the candidate one says. Therefore, the earliest he can become resident is 183 days. So actually, somewhere in beginning of July during the year, he can become resident, Cyprus resident. Let's go to candidate 2. Apologies about that. Let's go. Here it is. So in order for an individual to be considered as tax resident in Cyprus, he should spend more than 183 days in Cyprus in a calendar year. This is correct. I think some more explanation should be made here about the day of arrival in Cyprus, etc., etc. However, there is a rule, the 60-day rule, under which if a person spends 60 days in Republic and has not been a tax resident in any country, and also has not spent more than 60 days in any other country, this is completely wrong. So in a question like this, you need to list the conditions. So if there are conditions to be met, write them down in bullet point. So you will show to the examiner that these are the conditions. I know them, here they are. So there is a kind of mixed up here. And probably the second candidate was not sure 100% about the 60-day rule, because it says which if a person spends 60 days in the Republic, this is correct, but has not been a tax resident in any other country. So this is also correct. And also has not spent more than 183 days, it is. Then he or she will consider a tax resident in the Republic for that year. So he missed the employment or the hold of office in Cyprus, and also missed the residence in Cyprus owned on rented. So it's not very clear. And then in the case of Mr. Chi, now in order to be able to do so, he should move in Cyprus early in the calendar year, so to take advantage of 60-day rule. This is completely wrong, because the point is that Mr. Chai will retire to Cyprus, so he will not be holding an office or employed in Cyprus or anything like this. So all conditions should be met. Therefore, he will be regarded as resident in the Republic once he meets the 183 days. So somewhere in early July will be considered as a resident in Cyprus. So only 1 mark out of 4 was given to him, and I believe it was fair. Could be 1.5, but I believe 1 mark was fair to him, because he didn't show that he knows the legislation very well. So as a conclusion, the most important thing that you need to remember is that a skillful application of the tax principle learned is the key to doing well in the exam. This is what you must have in mind. So we need to know the tax principles. This is what you have learned in taxation. And in advanced taxation, you need to be able to apply these principles. So this is the key to success. Good luck.
That's great. Thank you, Polina, for that as well. So we are a bit over time, but I think these were really, really worthwhile insights. We have put some time aside for questions. However, so far all the questions that came in through the chat have been answered directly. There was just one other thing I promised to remind everyone of the special practice platform initiative that we are conducting this session. So as I mentioned before, when standard exam entry deadline has passed, we will allocate a question for practice to all students entered for advanced taxation Cyprus. The email will be sent to outline the specifics, how to access this question, because it will be slightly different to how you normally access the practice platform. First 50 submissions will receive a personalized feedback, and everyone who participates will receive a debrief of this question. So this is hopefully a really good opportunity to engage with the practice platform. It's only a 20-mark question, so it should take approximately 35 minutes to complete. I also hope that you will really engage with the practice platform and do plenty more practice in it, but hopefully you will take advantage of this unique study support initiative as well. So Polina, I think this is all for us, given that all the questions have been answered. Any final parting words from you?
No, I just want to thank you, everyone who attended the seminar. Thank you, ACCA, for giving me the opportunity to deliver this webinar. And hopefully we will see you again in ACCA webinars.
Thank you, Polina. It has been such a pleasure. Very grateful to you for sharing your extensive knowledge and insights to help in this exam preparation. To all of you watching, thank you so much for making time. We wish you the very best of luck as you prepare for December exam. And for now, I think it's bye from both of us. Thank you.
Thank you.